Good afternoon. My name is Bahman Yazdanfar, and this is Turnaround, a weekly show to discuss different aspects of the businesses and social aspects of that in different organizations, whether it is a small business or is larger organization such as government organization. My colleague John Hardy and I here and usually bring a guest to gain some experience from his or her background. And without further ado, I first thank you, Helen, who is laughing as John as
I'm
usual.
laughing with him. I know. He's out of
John
control.
loves the beginning of the.
I know.
First of all, thank you for coming.
You're so welcome. I think.
You see, I told you he's like a beat.
Val, I won't each week and then the next week.
So, Helen, can you, for our audience, introduce yourself
Sure.
with first name and last name and a little bit of your background in general, that what
Why
you
I'm
do,
here.
where did you start,
Yeah.
where you are at, and then we start the conversation
Sure.
regarding the business.
Happily. My name is Helen Goldstein. I'm from Toronto. And I guess what I'm well known in the city for a couple of things. One is that I was a very high-powered, very successful real estate agent for 15 years, and I dealt with downtown people. I call them heads with bread, people who have money, position, and who are a little
Bay
bit
Street.
crazy. No Bay Street, no Bay Street. No, it was actors, politicians, left of center politicians, directors, writers, people you would know who they are. So that was my real estate clientele, and it was very, very good business for me for a long time. 15 years I did it, and I was one of the top agents in Canada. And then I kind of got fed up with it. It kind of didn't matter how much money I made. I got to a point where I was making really good money, but I just didn't like what I was seeing in real estate. It was just worse and worse and worse. So I had a spiritual practice for a long, long time. Since the mid-70s, I had a strong spiritual practice. I was connected with the Tibetan community, and I had a Tibetan practice and yoga and meditation. And I kept doing that throughout my real estate time, which really was very helpful for me to cope and drew really interesting people to me because of that practice. And I decided to take a break, and I went to live in an ashram, a spiritual community, for a while. And while I was living there, and actually I was living with 100 women in a dorm and sharing a bathroom that was maybe 4 times the size of the bathroom I had at home. And it was there that the guru of the community, large community, 700 people, said, "I'd like you to take the yoga teacher training." I was very, very interested in yoga and meditation. So, if the guru says you do something, tells you to do something, you don't question, you just do it.
And you are in that condition.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a guru kind of person, but I knew that the life that I was living was not serving me particularly well. So even though I had everything financially, I had wonderful life, best that you could imagine, good marriage, great kid, all of that, everything that, wonderful friends, I had fun, everything that anybody ever wants in life, I had all of that. But it just didn't feel like it was enough. So I took the yoga teacher training, and on impulse in 1994, so we're talking 21 years ago, on impulse, I opened up a yoga studio.
After you came back.
Yeah.
And quite a yoga studio. I mean, it was a major yoga studio.
Major.
Right off the bat, it was so
Right,
large?
like within 6 months, I was turning people away. Yeah.
And how many people, what was like the size of your clientele?
Well, I had a very small space. I had a very small space at St. George and Bloor in the Medical Arts Building. That was temporary.
No, I recall that space, yeah.
And I would say, I mean, there was as many people turned away from a class as there were people that were coming. I mean, very quickly, I mean, the Globe did an article, every major newspaper. I was on television.
Was
radio.
it because of your previous contacts?
No.
Or was it because just the timing
It was
of that?
It was actually ahead of time. So there was a
because
core
94 still was before this
way before
fad
Madonna.
of the health and all
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, people were still doing aerobics.
Yeah, maybe or Pilates
Still
or something
doing
like that.
not even Pilates.
No,
But what
Pilates
I
came
did
after yoga.
Well, what I did, which was revolutionary, and that's why I was so busy, is when I opened up my yoga studio. When I was before I opened it up, I was going to 3 different studios. There were only 3 or 4 studios in the city at 1994. That was all. So if I wanted a relaxing class, I would go here. If I wanted a very intense class, I would go here. If I wanted a class that would tune up my mind, I would go here. So I was running all over the city because I was doing yoga 5-6 times a week. I was just focused on it. It really helped me a lot in my life. So I thought to myself, well, if I'm doing that, then why don't I do all these different styles of yoga under one roof? And I remember talking to my yoga teachers, and they said, oh, right, that would be like having a mosque, a synagogue, a church,
all
and
together,
they
yeah.
said, forget it. It'll never, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. First of all, you won't get teachers, nobody will want to teach there, and nobody will come. It's a crazy idea. No one's ever done it. And nobody had ever done it in North America.
And that was
Nobody.
a good idea for
And
itself.
I did it.
So kind of one-stop shopping for yoga.
You want prenatal? Come here. You want Pilates? Come here. And then we started doing ecstatic dance with drumming and meditation. And then I would have all these amazing teachers from all over, and I mean high quality teachers that had heard about the studio who wanted to teach there, like famous ones. And like one guy was, who became a very close friend of mine, taught Hillary Clinton yoga and taught Woody Harrelson, and he got,
Oh, they came from south of border.
this guy happened to live in Toronto
Okay, but he was
at the
traveling,
time, but he was traveling.
down.
And then I had another one that was Sting's personal teacher. So people would want to come and teach there, and then it became this
Place to be.
uber hip. And also I was located near the very expensive hotels, the Four Seasons.
Four Seasons and subway station,
Intercontinental.
the major hub
Right.
of west, southbound
Yep.
and east.
You're
and
right
west.
beside Yorkville.
Yeah.
You're
the,
a perfect
the
location.
hotels would send me movie stars. I would always have somebody in there who you would recognize, to do yoga.
Do you still have this studio?
No, and
Okay.
we'll talk about that in a
Okay,
moment.
for
But
sure.
anyways, so it was really busy, and it was great. I mean, it was fabulous, and then I expanded. I had a larger I went to a larger yoga studio, more space, triple the space, busy.
Where was that one?
Spadina and Bloor,
It still is
Just a
good
few-
idea. The same
couple of
as
Near the
blocks away.
JCC?
across the road.
All right, okay, there.
Excuse me. Yeah. Busy, 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 busy. And started doing some interesting, lots of workshops, and it was just busy. And then I opened up a second studio, and that was a very bad timing on that because my sister had just died, and then SARS happened.
Yeah,
And nobody was going anywhere. So I had this huge studio that was designed by the guy that designed the Drake Hotel, and it just cost me a fortune and just became, I was fine where I was, and then my business, somebody who was giving me business coaching said, you need to expand. You have to expand, which I shouldn't have. But who knew? Who knew that?
Also, it was like perfect storm. You had the exact wrong time.
Bad timing. No, nobody's going out during SARS, right?
well, nobody knew. Like in 2007, 2008, a lot of people they started to expand their business, but they didn't expect a financial.
Well, I
But also
expanded.
exactly same phenomenon.
I expanded, I think, in 2000, whenever SARS was, which I think was 2004.
Either 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
I mean, there was no
it.
previous experience with
Yeah.
anything like that I recall in Toronto. Certainly in my lifetime, no.
No. So,
that-
anyways, I
so that's
expanded
interesting,
then.
kismet, that took place.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
was just too bad. And the bottom line, the truth of it is that it's very hard to make money in a yoga studio.
At this
I
time.
lost at any time.
Yeah.
You know,
Was it lucrative before that? Like, was it?
No.
Was it? But so that it was marginal. So that even under those
Marginal.
optimal situations, it was marginal.
marginal. I paid my teachers too much. My rent was too high. My expenses were too high. Everything was just
Because
too
so then really, what was behind it? Was it? It wasn't. I mean, yes, it was a business, and you were a person with business experience. But what was the ethos behind? What was the idea behind this for you?
me?
Yeah, exactly. When you were doing the studio.
passion. I first of all, I was sick. I got a really weird form of hepatitis, and I was one of these people at the gym 5 times a week. So I stopped doing the gym because I couldn't do it. I was in bed for almost 2 years, and I went back to yoga, which is what I was doing in the 70s. And it cured me. I believe yoga actually cured me.
You
Well,
were
you
sick
move-
while you were an agent, a real
Yes.
estate agent. So the stress and the activity, overactivity of the work probably caused you to
Well,
get to
it
that.
made it worse. I believe I got sick when I was in Japan. I got hepatitis, a very rare form of hepatitis. Took a long time to diagnose. So yoga cured me, and I saw that.
So your shift from business to yoga,
excuse me.
as I'm gathering, please correct me if I'm wrong. First, you get to the point that money was enough, or comfort of life was enough.
I had enough money.
That you realize that you need more, and you cannot buy it or you cannot gain it.
You're right.
At the same time, you confronted with the health issue, which triggered the matter or intensified the issue, that desire to get what you want, and you end up with the yoga.
Right.
And now, how long did you have that studio?
13 years.
13 years. So it is by 2007 you closed it.
Well, no. So what happened? This is an interesting, and this is really what I want to talk
yeah,
about.
sure.
So it was always a struggle for me financially. I never really made any money at it. I always just barely got by. And my standard of living kept going down. But it was okay, because it really wasn't okay, but it had to be okay, because I felt like I was making a difference. I was doing something really good. I was getting amazing recognition and respect, and
Oh yeah, and plus you literally pioneered. I mean, this is the template for the modern studio,
Yes.
isn't it? They're all that way now.
no one's ever done what I did, right?
Yeah.
And that was my business thing, and that's why I understood that,
Yeah.
right? I have a nose. I've got a spidey nose for what.
But you were at the
people need.
bleeding edge in
I
the sense that you were
was.
too early.
Yeah, I was a little too early. But in a lot of the studios that you see in the city were people that worked at my studio, or
So it's
after-
simply they took that model,
Yes, a lot of them.
and then
did.
of course time caught up, and
And some of them are doing quite well, and a lot
what
of them aren't.
what would you say is different, let's say now and then,
Oh,
in
good
terms of
question.
the marketplace that would make that model work now or make it lucrative, which it
Well,
wasn't then.
See, it was
Yeah.
lucrative. I
more
I
lucrative, yeah.
personally,
Yeah.
okay, and I have to own it. I have to take
Yeah.
full responsibility. I had a terrible business model. The old model is you pay. What you're supposed to do is pay yourself first.
Yes, and then pay someone else.
I never got
That's
my
not the most
accountant.
Christian model.
No, my accountant
He's
kept
greedy
saying,
It's the-
pay
it's the Roman model.
yourself first. And when I should have fired some of the teachers, when I should have done this, had less staff, all I could think about was, well, she's having a baby. She just bought a house. I can't do that. And my accountant would say, are you out of your mind? I was collapsing RSPs. I was using all of my savings to keep this thing going, especially with the SARS
I have been
thing.
there.
Especially when SARS, until I opened up that second studio, I wasn't raking it in, but it was sustaining. You know what I mean? It was okay. I wasn't making real estate money, but I didn't have to anymore. But I bled through all of that. I just took, all of that was used to keep things going, to keep things going. Anyways, so what happened was in 2007, and this is really what's happening to yoga now. It's important to know. 2007, I was approached by a woman who taught at my studio, and she said, "Are you interested in selling?" And after I stopped kissing her feet, And I said, yes, get me out of here. You know, please just get me out of here. She introduced me to her boyfriend. Now, her boyfriend was a financial advisor with RBC. He had a title, Vice President RBC Securities. His name is Henry Cole.
They have hundreds of like that.
Right. So he bought my studio. We had an agreement that he was going to pay me, you know, not what it was worth, but it was okay. I was going to get out of it. And with a deliberate, calculated ripoff, instead of getting several $100,000, I wound up getting $17,000. Then
So it was a plot.
yeah, I think so.
So-
And I'll tell you why I think so. He then bankrupted the studio, put the studio into bankruptcy, left me with all the debt, which I just finally finished paying off about a month ago.
Oh,
8 years.
you still kept the liability, so your contract
He
was
was-
not passing the
He
liabilities.
didn't sign a contract. I was teaching yoga in Shanghai, and while I was away, he made a deal with my landlord behind my back to seize the studio because I owed 1 month's rent. And he renegotiated the rent and took over the studio.
So he took the assets without the liabilities.
yeah. So he stuck me with all of the liability, which, I mean, I was put in a position from someone who lived a nice life. I couldn't get a Walmart card. My daughter had to get me a credit card. I didn't go bankrupt because I didn't want to
Oh,
screw.
there's no,
all
then you
those
don't have that credit card.
Well, it would have been smart, actually,
Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah, yeah.
because it would, you know, but I couldn't do that because there were a lot of small providers, a lot of, you know, teachers and small providers that would have been screwed, and I wouldn't do that.
This is a good segue because John and I, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about actually John can elaborate on that better than I do, about the game that is always played in a work environment,
Yep.
in a business environment. And then he mentioned something very interesting. He said, there is always a game inside the game, and then again another game inside another game. It's like Russian
The
Russian
dolls.
Yeah.
You open it. And in this case, your desperation at that moment created an opportunity for some other people who play the game on you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Am I correct
I mean,
based on
well,
what
exactly.
you
I
said?
mean, there are
Let me
these
just finish,
people who
but
are.
Let me just
yeah.
finish and let me know what
Yeah.
let
Yeah,
me
go
let you
ahead.
know what happened,
Sure.
if I may, if that's
No,
okay. I don't want
certainly.
to take away from
No,
that.
not
but
at all. This is the
just
point.
to finish it. So he took over the studio, screwed a lot of people, horrible, did some horrible stuff. Turned out that he was ripping off his own clients. He was fired by RBC. He was
Oh, the guy
charged,
who was in the RBC
Henry
did
Cole,
that. Okay.
Henry Cole, charged with fraud, was supposed to spend 2 years in jail, and was fined $5 million, which is the largest fine ever. And as far as I know, I don't know that he went to jail.
Well, even if it's
So-
2 years, you could get out in 3 months.
Yeah. So, anyways,
it's
so
not.
the game, he played the game, but I mean,
Oh,
why-
it's happening every day, every minute as
Yeah.
we speak. And John actually is a good person to analyze this
Well-
kind of the situations. I mean.
Basically, there are these people who, one person's misery is another person's opportunity.
right?
So even the larger game is ultimately squeezed. Everybody is basically put under pressure. Well, essentially, the person who is just about to drop off, the person who is in a squeeze, for instance, the bankers, the network know about this. So, for instance, an example, someone like that would have a grapevine, so he would essentially know through the financial circles of where are the low-hanging fruit. In
Right.
other words, the opportunities. So all of a sudden they'll appear, and to the person who is not wise to this, it'll just seem like, oh my God, how
You
could this
saved me.
happen? This is, on the one hand, at first it's presenting as a savior, on the other hand you think to yourself, what rotten bad luck. And it's not. It's that it's part of the system. It's almost like the system works that it squeezes, and then finally when it's squeezing right at the end, then it's got those other people who are just ready to take those little droppings and then squeeze the last little bit out of them. And it's just a continuous squeeze.
Example for that when it comes to the financial crashes.
Because ultimately, like, well, it's just like, let's say Young Street. You take a look at Young Street and people will be, thinking to themselves, wow, these people are charging a lot of money and look what we're having to pay and prices are going up, et cetera, et cetera. But the person who is absolutely always making money there are the landlords.
Oh, yeah.
Who are squeezing and squeezing. So everything comes down. So you've got the landlord who's holding on to that property, who then now is charging that person who's now trying to sell, is under the pressure, they have to dance, and all the landlord has to do is just sit there. So ultimately, whoever loses, it couldn't be the customer because he's paying more, it couldn't be the vendor because he can't sell, but at the end of the day, the one who's protected essentially is the player at the top of the heap, and everybody else essentially are kind of trading for crumbs, because most of it's been taken off the table. And that, unfortunately, exactly is the game. So that what you have is that those people who have the greatest amount of initiative, instead of being rewarded, are the ones most penalized by the system. We call it the bleeding edge. They're the pioneers getting in. I was watching a program on Tesla. People made billions on his ideas. He goes broke.
Yeah.
And on and on. And but what is the situation now in terms of the yoga world? Like, in other words, what yoga is one thing was supposed to be, and what has it turned into? Because it seems like, could you speak to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm horrified, actually. I'm so disappointed when I see what's going on. I think people open up yoga studios with good intention, right? They really want to make a difference. Some people do it because they think they're going to make a lot of money. But, what I'm seeing is, and I was having a conversation, I was just talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine. I had a guru who was teaching at my studio sort of near the end, who was doing a yoga teacher training, and it was near when everything was I was ready to leave. And he said, I'm having a really, we met all these students that evening. We went out for dinner. He said, I'm really having a hard time trying to figure this one out. And I said, what? He said, which of those women I'm going to sleep with first?
So it is the original.
Was that his way of enlightening these women, or was this just for his own benefit or for theirs as well?
Whose benefit?
I just said to him, you are not doing that.
It could be that he was really.
You're not doing that.
Whose benefit? Who else's benefit?
He thought of himself as a great benefactor who was actually sharing,
maybe he was.
Maybe I'm just being an optimist.
Maybe he's boosting his self-esteem. We don't know that.
With so many women. So, there's that, okay, at least. And I just said, no. But of course, did he listen to me? He's a guru, right? And the women are like, he's not even particularly attractive, but it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, he's a guru. So there's that's going on.
You should
but
give courses on being gurus. Those would sell.
Who I should give it? They should. How to be a guru.
Be a guru because you get the chicks, you get the cars, you get the yachts, and it's like a guru package.
Yeah.
I think that market is saturated already.
No, I think there's always room for a guru.
Exactly. There's yoga courses, but there's no guru courses as far as I know.
Well, let's talk about that later.
Later.
Yeah,
the next show will be on guru.
Helen, can I just go back at the time that you went from the highly successful position in real estate today, because I want to touch on that. What was the state of your mind about having all of that money and not being happy about what's going on in your life?
My state of mind was that, and it was very interesting, thank you for asking, the more I wanted to leave, the less time I was spending selling real estate. I was spending maybe 20 hours a week. The more money I made. Like, I was at a point where somebody would phone and they'd say, come list my house, and I'd go, I don't want it. Didn't matter.
I have to go there.
I have to go, and I'd show up.
By that point.
And I was a gardener. I was really into gardening, so I'd show up in my gardening clothes, right, to take a listing. So my state of mind was that I'm a really good salesperson. I have a strong spiritual practice. And I have a nose for, it's like I was the person who would sell a house in an area a year before it became hot. Like I just knew, like I knew when it was gonna, that's what I was famous for.
Okay.
So I knew.
Should have been in development. Then you would have made a killing.
Well, I was selling it at
Not in 90s.
No, but if you've got that nose, that's what those are the people who make.
I
the
have a
absolute-
nose, I know. So what was my state of mind? My state of mind was that I kept getting sick. I kept getting the effects of the liver, the
That is why I wanted to
hepatitis.
say, if you were in a good financial position, if you had a very healthy diet, if you have a healthy lifestyle, why all of this? Is it just because of your mind that was not there into it, or is it it is extreme lack of satisfaction of life that makes you sick?
Well,
you
I
ever-
think I actually picked up a virus in Japan.
you said,
I do.
yes.
I
But
think.
don't
I
you
picked
think
up-
also that we get these viruses,
'Cause it
we
was
get
such
these
a
things when
weird-
we're susceptible. It's
Yes.
also synchronous.
Yes.
I mean, how would you interpret it from that point of view? Like, was this also something that was in a way like a turning point for you?
Oh,
The
it
virus
was.
itself
It was the turning point.
was the mechanism that actually was like the catalyst.
I couldn't get out of bed, and me, I'm like, I'm like out there, and you know that, right? I mean,
Well, and I guess we only
Started
change when it gets
thinking a lot.
when it gets bad enough.
yeah, it was bad.
So it's like I mean, one possible thing is that you're in your business, and you're in a way you're actually trying to destroy it, but of course it's almost gotten past you where it's working beyond you,
Yeah.
where it's just keeps growing and growing, and then it's almost like it takes this, because nothing short of this would actually take you right out of it, because it's almost like the ether, whatever this system above us ends up providing the mechanism that's required.
Yeah.
But it comes to the point where maybe change only takes place, when we talk about corporate change or any change, when the pain gets so great. So how would
Unbearable.
you describe the pain? Like, one of the things that's the most, in a way, interesting is the actual, because people, generally speaking, you had exactly what people would think of as the opposite of pain, right?
I had, what I thought
Yeah.
was the best.
Because
I mean,
and you
I
were,
have
culturally, everything you were successful. Everything
yeah,
you were trained as a
everything.
child to think, you're
Yeah,
successful.
everything.
And so, what was the sensation then? Like a day in the life when you're actually there at that moment. What
Yes,
was
the
feeling?
moment that you wanted to get up and
Was it like
And
hell
get-
with
was it
I go.
loneliness?
Well, there
or
were a
emptiness?
couple.
What
no,
were the feelings?
None of those. Well, first of all, I want to just tell you that my illness happened 2 years before I left real estate.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
but
it
it
was
was like
gradual.
it was gradual. And then when I started to feel better, I went right back into it and crazy again and got sick again. Okay.
Okay.
So what
So you
happened
didn't
for
get the
me-
message first time?
No,
Okay.
no.
That is the point that
Yes,
you
I
need.
did not get the message the first
First
time.
time.
So what happened to me was very interesting. I'm a very social, out there, extroverted person, and I love people. And a lot of real estate, you have to go to dinner parties, and you have to go to this, and you have to go to that. And I dreaded being with people who really wanted to talk about a 4-car garage house.
I don't blame you. It is very interesting to talk about that for half an hour. But
No, not half an hour.
Not 15 years.
Not a minute even.
Not the 45th
No.
time.
No, I mean, I could. You see, the thing
Should
is,
give
I
them a little
have the
cassette.
ability. I have the ability to talk to anybody. Okay, I do. I do. I don't know. I mean, I can talk to a wall, but I couldn't do
About
it.
anything but 4-car garage.
No, I could talk. I could do that. I was able to do that, and then we'd have to go to all these functions, and they were, and it was like I can't, and that's part of my business. And my husband, my ex-husband, and I worked together, husband, and he was still into it and like really pushing me, and I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it. So there was that, and then the big thing for me, it's so interesting. When I was away living in that ashram, I was washing toilets and making beds for
So you saw the drastic gap between where you were talking about for
Reality.
car garage to the
and this reality, right?
tile bathroom. Yes.
Yeah, and while I was away, we were renovating a house, and I'm sure. I mean, I came back to this bathroom, and it was. I couldn't take a bath. The bathtub was so big that when I filled the water, that I floated in it. And it was just the excess of the, of that whole time. And people were just spending obscene amounts of money. Restaurants were popping up. I mean, we went out for dinner, a celebration dinner, a group of us, and I sat there in the restaurant, and it just made me sick to see the waste and the
How
way
long
money.
were you in the ashram?
3.5 months, but I had been
That's a long period of time for
doing
in an
this. Yeah, but this had been my life for decades. But it was not. It was this part of my life, and then it became this part of my life.
So it was
Oh,
not
so
the
it was the
priority
subtext
list,
that now
uh,
became the
you
main.
brought it.
Interesting.
You said that you mentioned ex-husband a couple of times. When was have you divorced? Or
Oh yeah, we split up in '97. He just couldn't.
Oh, so it was in the midst of your success in the yoga business.
Yes.
Was he a real estate agent too?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And without getting to the details, was it your success that caused this kind of divorce, or it was just a
Like-
lack of congruency or anything?
Lack
like
of congruency. He just wasn't. He just didn't like how he just couldn't relate to what my life was.
Well, I can imagine. That is why I ask if he was in the real estate business.
Yes.
Because one of my old life, I was for a very short period of time. I was a real estate
Oh,
agent.
really?
Yeah, maybe
Ah.
I think we all
25.
went through this phase. I was too.
I
for
have
a
been
very
in
short
the
time.
number of the phases, and
Yeah.
I remember one of the in Vancouver, of course, but one of the highest degree of the incident among real estate agents was divorce one,
Yeah.
gambling, and then drinking. These three were
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 were that is why I asked for.
Well, no, we were fine until I left real estate.
Yes. But then you didn't have anything to talk about on the dinner table. 4-car garage versus the
Yeah, I mean,
yoga.
I just didn't, and I mean, to be very honest with you, we loved each other deeply. And
I'm pretty sure.
no,
but
really. We were both really very adamant about not splitting up. We didn't want to split up, but we were like this, there was just we just couldn't
Connect.
connect. I mean, the wonderful thing about him was through all the years, we were together for 18 years, I would take off for a month or two and do my yoga thing or my meditation thing, and he was fine. He was fine about it. But you see, I was the principal breadwinner. I made the money.
So you were the
That creates a
successful
certain
one.
pressure,
Yeah.
I guess.
I made the money. So when I left, our income went from, over 3 years. And that was hard for him. He didn't ask for that.
No, I understand that.
You know?
That was just a side because
Yeah.
you mentioned a couple of times. Now, what you're doing these days?
Well, what I'm doing these days is I teach in corporations. I teach yoga and meditation and wellness.
Okay.
I have an online program where I teach wellness people how to teach wellness
So like
in
making
corporations.
gurus
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And I host these parties that I was supposed to do this year, but my mother passed away a week before.
My condolences.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I do these parties called Buddha Groove, and they're just big parties for people like us.
Are you
get together
following
and dance.
Buddha's teachings?
Do I follow Buddha's teachings?
Yeah.
Well, Buddha's teachings are the same as
No, I'm
Allah
just
and-
because you mentioned ashram and all of that. So I thought-
Yeah, I mean, I meditate every day,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I try to be a good person.
Well, that is.
I
good
mean,
enough.
that's everybody's, isn't it? That's
Well, we all strive to be good people. Not
What was
all of
the-
us succeed.
One of the things that's always confused me about yoga studios is, let's say in India, what is the function of yoga versus here? Like here, it seems to me, as the layman, you see it as a kind of somewhat upgraded exercise in the sense that, as opposed to standard exercise where you're just twisting in calisthenics and doing various things, here there's something that there's more method to it. It's got history, etc., etc. There's some sort of spiritual aspect which is vague. That's more or less how I, the layman here, let's just say, experience it. People who are practicing it tend to be fairly good-looking, slim, younger, very into their health and their bodies. They're into health food, etc., etc. Now, what does it look like in India?
Well, in India, it's not. It doesn't have the social, groovy hipness that it has here. It's a way to be healthy. It's a way to find God. It has much more of a spiritual component. And you would have in a room, you might have 100 people and you can't move, right? And it's not.
And who are those people there? Like, what part are they from? All walks of society, or from certain? Which strata would they be?
I mean, you have to have obviously you have to have a little bit of money to.
So they're not the absolute poor, but above that, it's anybody.
Yeah.
I see.
And here, what's happened to yoga, which I have such difficulty with, is that it's become hip, which is, I mean, honestly, I think whatever gets you on the mat, great, because you become a better person. You do. Yoga will make you a better person. It does. You slow down, you become reflective. It's a good thing.
So that's true of Ashtanga as well, or?
Yeah, any kind of yoga.
That's moving along
well,
pretty
that's
fast,
more, but Ashtanga is really more sort of a Western, power yoga,
Fusion.
power. Let's go.
Yeah,
I
it's
teach
like
a
on
meditative.
steroid, like mouse on
Let's
oxygen
go.
yoga.
Let's go. Right?
Yeah.
Which to me, I mean, in my humble opinion, is not maybe the best thing. For most of us Westerners who are like this, right? We're going, and then you do a yoga that gives you that going.
So you can go just a little faster.
Right. That's not.
It's turbo yoga.
May not be the best thing for you, right? So what I see is that there's way too many yoga studios. The yoga, and here's how yoga studios make their money. Yoga studios make money by doing yoga teacher training. So they have a mill. They do 2, maybe 3 trainings a year. They charge $4,000 for training. They get 20 to 30 people.
4,000 to make them like a train to train.
So they're covering the rent for the rest of the time.
So basically, they don't make a lot of money from people buying
I have seen
passes.
some of them sell merchandise as well. A lot of
A little bit of
clothing
merchandise.
and all of
Yeah.
It is a fashion by itself.
Right. There's yoga clothing,
Yeah.
and then there's certain symbols, that you wear,
Lululemon,
Lululemon, and $110 yoga pants.
Yeah.
Helen,
Shoot me.
if I ask you, based on what you went through since 1994 till 2007, and then eventually the predicament that you were in as a result of the
Rip-off.
advisor.
Yes.
If not necessarily yoga business, from perspective of the business, I have a question in 2 parts. First one is, you mentioned before you get to the point of desperation to sell the business, you had a business advisor who suggested to expand. The first part of my question is, where was he at the time you were selling it? And the second part is, after you answer that, if you want to give a suggestion to someone to go through any form of the business which is in the form of the pioneering something or some form of the anything, what suggestion or advice you give him or her?
Oh God, that's a really good question. So my business advisor was a woman who I did not qualify enough. I didn't check her out enough. I just got, I got emotional. I became really good friends with her.
So it's not like a turnaround duo.
No.
No.
She,
Nothing like that.
I mean, she'd been
Clearly.
in several businesses. She walked the talk. She talked the talk. She was sophisticated, but did not give me good advice. Terrible advice, actually, really bad. And
But where
what
were
was the
she?
logic
Where were
behind
she
this?
at
she had disappeared.
at the time of the sale, she disappeared.
She just, like that, she disappeared. As soon as I moved into the other location and SARS happened and all of that,
In
and
the
she could see
threats,
the writing on the wall that I was going down, that the studio was not going to be, I mean, I wasn't making any money there,
We
right?
went AWOL.
She took off.
What was the logic behind the expansion?
That I was so busy. that it made sense because, and I wasn't really paying attention. I mean, I was so stupid, actually, I have to admit it, that because I had structure in place, I had staff and I had structure, that it would be economy of scale to have another studio. But this other studio was in a whole different area that I didn't know, and I would still have to renovate it, and I would still have to staff it. But I was busy.
So where was the economy? That's what I'm just thinking, because essentially it's not like you've got all of those are variable costs. You've got a new set, so essentially you're creating a new business. It's almost like if you have a cafe here and then you open a cafe there. It's essentially opening up a new business. The only thing that's transferable is the know-how. But even if this one is only marginal in terms of what it's making, rather than, let's say, increasing the value added here, would be the normal thing for a business consultant to do. Isn't it? Like,
I think it's emotional decision.
It was an emotional decision.
It's like
no, but that's an emotional for me. But for the business advisor to advise that's what I find very interesting.
I don't
because
think she
you're
really
adding
knew
risk.
what she was doing.
Yeah, because that's another possibility.
No, she really.
She knew enough at least to disappear at the right time.
She disappeared as soon as
So she wasn't completely
She
incompetent.
was like, one of those cartoons where they scram. It was like
Exit stage left.
exit stage left. Where is she?
Roadrunner.
The only thing that kept her
Roadrunner.
business was knowing when to leave.
The only thing that kept her busy was cashing her checks. But
Now,
anyway.
looking back at all of that, if someone sits here across from you and say, I have a so-and-so idea, and I know it's not new, but I have different form of it, the same way that you combine three styling under one ceiling, and say, okay, can you just advise me not how to go about it, but about the pitfalls of there? What would you tell him or her?
Okay, so I would say have a lot of money behind you.
Okay.
More, like 2 or 3 times more than you think you need.
For what? For working capital?
For working capital.
So to cover the monthly,
Yeah, if you think you need 1,000, have 3.
So how
This
many?
is shocking.
So let's say when you started out, how many months did you have, let's say, of working capital? Mind you, or you had quite a bit.
Oh,
You
I
had quite a
had-
bit.
I
She
had
had
money.
probably for
Yeah,
years.
you had money.
I had lots of money.
But yeah,
That
I think,
wasn't
what
the
is
prob-
the
that
rule of
was
thumb?
the
I think
problem.
3 to 6.
6 months
6
usually.
months of assuming that if you didn't have a single
Yeah.
customer, that 6 months you could
Okay,
actually
but
last.
the problem was that I had a lot of money.
Yeah, maybe in
The
in
problem.
your
So
case,
it doesn't
you-
force a discipline on you.
Yeah.
No, I just
Exactly.
thought, oh, my accountant's freaking
Sooner
out
or later
and
it'll
going,
kick in.
we have a problem. I go, oh, don't worry about it. I've got money. It's okay. Wasn't
Okay,
paying
the
attention.
first is they have to have a little bit contingency fund to
a large, like
contingency.
more than they think
Yeah.
that they need.
What else?
The other thing is that they have to really be careful who their advisors are.
Do you suggest to get that advice?
Get an advisor, but interview 3 people, not like what I did. I just liked her,
Many people go for
Very
for
bad
that.
mistake.
A lot of them. This city is full of mistakes.
Very bad mistake. Interview 3 people, get references, and really ask for a plan. Like, how are they going to change things for you? How are they going to do that? So that's
You would
number
be
2.
surprised. Okay, too.
Oh, so what
No,
you
no,
were
go
gonna say?
ahead.
So that's number 2. Be realistic, and like what is the real like when you look at the numbers? Are you kidding yourself, or are you
Or
being
try to justify things
'Cause I justified
by
a
your
lot.
beliefs.
like I wanted? I mean, the writing was on the wall, but I kept going. Like really look at the numbers and the reality of what's going on around you, and.
Now, just to return back to, let's say, the cash flow issue, and yours was a successful business. Basically, it was successful until it failed. Like,
Yeah.
certain things happened to it,
Yeah.
but at least, unlike most businesses, it had a period of success where
Yes.
ultimately it was on a good
At the
trajectory, right?
beginning, like-
So if we go back to that period when things were going right, even in that situation, how long did it take you before you were in the black, like in the sense that you had a sufficient number of customers to cover your fixed costs, everything?
Break even point.
Yeah. Around
a
what?
year, which
Ab-
is unheard of.
Exactly, and that's good.
Yes.
Year is
Exactly,
very good,
and that's the
actually.
point. And that's in a business
Yeah.
with all your connections, everything behind you.
And I have
it still takes a
connections.
year.
Yeah.
And because you
And
have
therefore-
low overhead, of course.
So that
if
another
you-
person
first.
should be looking
At
at a
first.
2-year
Yes,
break even,
yeah.
3.
or 2 or 3 year break even.
yeah.
Exactly.
Because if you have a restaurant, you put $100,000-$200,000 worth of equipment, and then your
Here, your
overhead
advantage is you don't
starts-
you don't have the equipment for the most part.
Well, you
basically
do
have to
because you've
reserve.
got to buy the mats. You've got to buy. There's
But
a
compared to
Well,
no, not
it's-
compared
it's-
to a
compared-
restaurant.
it's
Yeah.
low relatively,
Yes.
but you've got a high staff.
You have a very high staff, very high.
How are we doing, Chris, on time? Five. Okay. So we are getting very close to the end of the program. First of all, how is your business right now going?
Well, to be very honest with you, I have not put a ton of energy into it right now. You mean the
no,
online?
what you're doing right now for the corporations and for the corporate kind of
As we
function,
speak,
as we
right
speak.
this minute,
Yeah.
it's not going. I'm not doing much, but that's because of me, not because
Okay,
it's
so
not
you are
out
not
there.
really pushing it.
No,
right now.
I spend my winters in California.
Oh, okay.
My kids are there, and my
Oh,
grandchildren.
I'm glad that you are here now.
Yeah, so I'm leaving a week from today. I'll be there.
Oh, good
My
timing,
last,
John.
yeah.
well,
You're supposed to be here
Helen
last
held
week.
off
but-
just for this
Yes,
interview.
I did. I
Yeah,
knew
yeah.
there'd be this interview.
That's right.
So I'm not here. I'm away for 5 months a year.
Okay.
I help my kids. I help my daughter out with her kids,
Okay.
with my grandsons. So
So for you, it's like a hobby at this stage.
it's not. I mean, I if I really put my energy into it, I could hop
No,
on
I'm
board
pretty
again.
Sure, yeah.
I've put energy in the last 2 years into my online program,
Okay.
which is doing okay. It's not great, but it's okay. My online program. And I planned when I arrived, I was planning to do a big Buddha Groove, one of my big parties. I want to do salons. John and I are talking about that, about doing salons.
What do you mean by salons?
Small gatherings
Okay.
for conscious community.
Salons is referred to that old salon, like a bar.
Essentially like the
bar.
old 18th century
Yeah,
Madame
yeah.
Pompadour.
Salon,
And as
yeah.
opposed to like-minded people who have perhaps the same range of interests, but they're not so like-minded that you don't have
Just
conversations.
they are in
So
the
it's an
same
exchange of
vicinity,
views.
kind of the thing.
Yes.
That's right, exchange
Yes.
of views.
Okay.
But who are interested in topics from
That's a
politics,
good idea.
Interested,
That's a good
interested.
idea.
spirituality.
Well, I started that, but then my mother passed away.
Yeah, you told me.
So then I've sort of been on, dealing with that and then lots of other stuff.
Yeah.
So when I come back in the spring, I will get myself
So
going
maybe we
again.
can get again together, have
Yeah, I
you
would
back
love
here,
that.
Yeah,
and
sure,
then,
exactly.
and then
So it means
why
once
not
we're
we
launching
can start.
that.
Because we just started this program just a month ago, as I earlier mentioned that, and we are just, it is in the pilot project, and in the new year we are going to improve upon it based on what we gather.
Well, I think you're a
Anyway.
very good host, by the way. I think both of you are.
Thank you
No,
very
But
much.
him in
You-
particular,
No,
I'm-
you
I'm-
pay attention.
as opposed to me,
Well,
who's
no.
attention deficit. And you're
Yes,
absolutely right.
We both have attention deficit. But no.
Now you neglected one of your children's.
No. Like we play, but you know what I liked about you? You remembered the dates. You remembered the sequence. You have.
I
you're
have
good.
nothing else to think about. That is why.
Okay, absolute lack of imagination.
Is that what you're telling me?
No, I have to. I have to. Like you, I have been in the sales, and the form
I'm not very good at it.
a form of the sales that I learned. It's not 80s, is after 90s, and I learned hard way to listen more and
Yeah.
talk
The
less.
hard way.
Listening is I know.
And
That would be actually good program sales the hard way.
And it's still, it is I am work in progress.
Yeah. Well, you're doing good.
But thank you very much for
Well,
coming
thank
here.
you. It's
easier
Getting
with good
close to the,
guests, exactly.
End of
Thank you.
Do you have anything for the end of the show?
Nothing really useful.
Come on, yes you do.
No,
You're
I mean,
you're
but
good.
it usually comes to me after the show ends. That's the
Okay.
problem.
Yeah,
So I think at
he
this
has-
point,
he has
I'll
to-
have to save it for next show.
Okay.
He has for the next show at the introduction maybe
That's
he brings.
We can only hope.
If we
That's
can't
that's
keep
what
him.
keeps our viewers watching, just in case something actually,
Yeah.
some real gem does pop
Okay.
out. Yeah.
I'm sure it will.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Helen.
you for
and I wish
inviting
you,
me.
first of all, my condolences for your recent loss, and
thank you.
secondly, I Hope you have a good, nice and safe and happy trip in
Thank you.
California.
Yes,
and I
thank
look
you.
forward to the spring when you come back. By then, maybe John and I grow up a little bit. And
I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, and
become,
we'll
become a little bit more useful.
No, but you know what?
To
I
society
think
at
the two
large,
of you
rather than just
complement
ourselves.
each other very nicely. Actually, it's
Thank
a
you
very
much.
nice
It's nice
duo.
of you. It's
Well,
nice
put it this
of
way: when we don't have guests, that's what we do. We basically just exchange compliments.
Ed McMahon, Johnny Carson.
Thank you very much.
But you're not Ed. You're smarter than Ed and better
A little
looking.
fitter, anyways.
Much better looking.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
I'll be selling Geritol next.
This Tuesday, 8th of December 2015. We have just one more show for this year. And please tune in and visit our website at www.turnaroundduo.com for the basic information, contact information, as well as partial copies of John's book and the pilot project, which is stated in details for you if you decided either to ask our consultation or contact us and have a chat with us or being a guest in our show. Thank you very much and good night.